Hi everyone, and welcome to Behind the Message. My name is Lauren Knautz, and joining me is Ted Canaris, and we are talking about week 4 of Do the Work. If you haven't already watched week 4 of Do the Work, I invite you to pause this, go watch it on our YouTube channel or on demand, please, so that you can know what we're going to be talking about today. Ted, in your message, you talked about the heart posture that is required in order to initiate when we're talking about doing the work in relationships. So I was wondering if you could share with us a personal story of when maybe your heart really wasn't in it, how you got over that and were able to initiate with someone.
Yeah, I think that heart posture is so critically important because we can initiate like reconciliation or a confrontation of some kind a bunch of different ways. Like a fight, I guess, could be initiated, you know what I mean?
True.
Or reconciliation can be initiated. And if we're looking to reconcile and to initiate a form of reconciliation and peace, it's so important that you're in a place of peace. And really the most important step in that process is forgiveness. We talked about that in previous week's message in week 3 of Do the Work. If you haven't watched that, please go back and watch that one as well, because really the first 3 weeks lead to the 4th week. And to be an initiator, we have to really do these previous steps. And so one of the stories that comes to mind for me, and I shared last week, was I gave the previous week's message on forgiveness, was a story that happened several years ago with a guy who used to be a really close friend of mine. And for some reason, he just started sharing some really hurtful, untrue stories about me to a small group of people. And he was trying to, anyway, it's a long story, but he was sharing a lot of untrue things that were very hurtful. Mm-hmm. And I had no idea until somebody asked me about one of the stories. Wow. And it was like, I'd never experienced that in a close relationship before. And it was really hard for me. I was very upset. I was really hurt. And frankly, it took me a long time for my heart to be in a place where I was ready to initiate because I was so angry. Mm-hmm. And really the most important step for me in that process was talking with trusted friends who could help give me wise counsel. Mm. But the biggest thing was prayer and just asking God to change my heart because my heart was against this man and not for him. And it's possible to be for somebody and still acknowledge that what they did was wrong.
Right.
And still acknowledge that something needs to be done to fix that, but to not have that edge in your spirit against them. And that's something that we don't really have control over. And that's something that we need to ask God to do in us. And sometimes it takes a long time, sometimes it's a short time. But I think of that story because I really needed to do a lot of internal work until my heart was in a place for that conversation to be productive. And that's why we talk throughout the message a couple different times, like it's important to be patient and not to spring it on somebody, or if it's taken you a long time to get to a point to have this conversation, you need to give them the same chance. Mm-hmm. And so that patience needs to go both ways.
And sometimes when you spring it on someone, they don't even know that what they did to you was wrong. Yeah. And so having that conversation beforehand saying, hey, just so you know, I really need to have this conversation with you. What happened really wasn't okay with me, and I'd like to work through this with you. So then they're able to, be thinking to themselves like, oh yeah, that was wrong, or oh, how can I love you better and be in a better relationship with you in the future?
Totally.
Another thing that you talked about was being patient, and another one of the steps or the things to talk about was being differentiated. Yeah. And I feel like that's a new concept for me, mm-hmm. and I would love if you could explore what being differentiated means and then how to do that in these conversations that we're having.
Yeah. Well, there's a lot that we could say about being self-differentiated, and that's really what we're talking about there. Mm-hmm. And we touched on it a little bit in the talk about really knowing how you feel, like understanding your feelings, understanding your thoughts, your beliefs, your values, and being grounded in those things. Because sometimes we go into a conversation and we haven't really done the work to process, what do I really think about this? How do I really feel about this? What do I really believe is important about this? What do I really think are the next steps that need to be taken? And if we don't do the pre-work to say, okay, this is where I am at, and acknowledging the reality of where we're at, we run the risk of just being pushed or pulled into whatever stream is happening around us, whatever activity. Or the other person might respond in anger, and if we're not self-differentiated, we get just sucked right up into that anger. Sorry, these plants are very fragile. Instead of giving them the space to say, okay, that is you, and I am not feeling that right now, and that's okay. I don't need to be enmeshed with you, and
Those
I don't
I
need
statements.
Yeah, exactly. We don't need the way you feel to determine how I feel. Right. And that's where communicating I statements, like you said, are so important. But having done the work before that, so that you're clear about where you are and who you are in that situation.
That's awesome. Is there anything else you would like to share just as coming out of that message? Week 4, this series has been a lot, just building on each other, trying to figure out how we really do the work in our relationships with other people. And throughout the four messages, we've talked about keeping one specific relationship in mind. And again, if you haven't watched the other 4 messages, just pause this, go watch them, come back, because they are incredible. They build on each other. And so just as a summarization, what do you think is one big takeaway from this series that maybe people may have missed, or that you just want to drive home after the series is closed?
It's a great question. And it's hard to summarize so much, but the one thing that I would say, sort of the foundation of everything that we said and everything that we've talked about over these last few weeks, is that healthy relationships around us start with a healthy relationship with you and God. And I know sometimes that can feel abstract, almost too abstract to be like practical in the moment, but the truth is nothing could be further from the reality of our lives and how we operate. I think the most important thing is for us to really understand who we are before God, our identity before God as His beloved children, to understand the great forgiveness that we have received through Jesus, to be reconciled into relationship with Him and the mission that we've been called into, the life we've been called into as a result of that. And that fills us with a life and a love that we can't muster just by pulling ourselves up by our bootstraps. And really that identity becomes the foundation. That relationship becomes the foundation that all of this other work can be built on. And all these other healthy relationships can take place inside of that. Apart from that, we're always trying to accomplish something. We're trying to compare something. We're trying to prove something. We're trying to earn something. But when we're operating from that healthy relationship with God, where there's nothing more to be earned, there's nothing to be lost, there's nothing to be gained, like we talked about in the previous message, that foundation is what Jesus talks about as like the rock, right? When we build our house on the rock, when the storms rise, the house is solid. If you built it on the sand, on anything else, when the storm comes, the house is ruined. And the same is true in all of our relationships. When our foundation is built on the rock of Jesus, whatever comes in life has the chance to really thrive because of that foundation. And without it, it's not going to work. And so I would say that would be the biggest thing, to focus on the most fundamental reality, which is your relationship with God, building your house on that firm foundation, and then from that place, doing the work of relational restoration.
That's awesome. Thank you so much for sharing, for expanding, and for taking the time to talk with me today.
Thank you.
If you have any more questions or want to know any more of the resources that we offer, go to communitychristian.info. We would love to be able to pray for you. We would love to be able to connect you into a small group. Again, talk about the foundation, building that foundation in your relationship with God. So thank you so much for joining us, and I hope you have a wonderful week.
Do we want to start them facing each other like this? Is this
Why?
anything?
Yes.
Is
Why
this
are we?
something? These are the chairs from the shoot. Like we didn't even move them. Yeah, I don't know if we could actually like act out a reconciliation with these two. I don't think that we need that.
I don't know if my heart's in it yet.
Exactly. And if you're not ready,
And I'm totally unaware of our conflict, so
Right.
we're not at a good
which
starting point.
is